I'm here with Chris Steadham. He is Vice President of Technology at Aptyx. Chris, thanks for joining us on the Future of MedTech Opportunities series.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
We're going to dive into the importance of designing delivery systems. But before that, we always love to understand our guests' motivation. I understand that you, like a lot of folks in MedTech, have a real sort of personal connection and a personal story about medical technology. What drew you to your interest in implants?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. You're absolutely right. Early in my career, I was working in the interventional side of the business, and my father became ill and needed some vascular implants. And, that's great that the technology was available. It extended his life, but not really the quality of his life.
Mm-hmm.
Really had a lot of complaints about the pain of recovery, the pain of surgery, and all that goes along with having these serious interventions. And, I wasn't working in that area. That wasn't where my career was. And it took a long time for me to pivot into that area. It never left my mind. It's a lot of these things are genetic. It could be me in the future, but it really took a while to get there. And then here at Aptyx Interventional, here in Charlotte, we've been able to focus on interventional technologies and specifically implants and delivery systems. And that's been extremely rewarding.
So as you mentioned, we're seeing incredible advances in medical device innovation, from new materials to energy sources. How are delivery systems evolving in step with the implants that they're designed to support?
They're trying to keep up.
Mm-hmm.
Delivery systems need to do a little better. The devices are getting smaller. They're more intricate, and they're oftentimes deploying in novel ways. The delivery tools still need to give doctors precise control and real-time feedback. And that means like better steerability through this tortuous anatomy.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes with these more intricate devices, a staged release mechanism. They may want to start a proximal to distal, distal to proximal, and there could be
Gotcha.
other components along the way. They also need to integrate markers for imaging, and oftentimes now even more sensors, so that the physicians can actually see what they're doing as they go through the procedure. Thankfully, more often now, implants and delivery systems are being developed together, and this is leading to better performance and a much smoother physician experience. In many ways, delivery systems are kind of the unsung heroes of the procedures. As my colleague Eric likes to remind our engineering teams, it really doesn't matter how great an implant is if the delivery system can't deploy it accurately. So we really believe it's critical that the delivery systems and implants are developed together.
That makes total sense. So are there still design gaps that exist between the two, between implants and delivery systems, when they aren't developed in tandem at the same time?
There sure can be, and oftentimes are.
Mm-hmm.
And in particular, when we have these gaps, they lead to really poor precision for the physicians, oftentimes a very awkward handling experience. And you see this with friction and torque issues that come up that are unexpected, in that early design process. Sometimes you even see engineers add extra complexity into the system to try to overcome these issues, just to work around the design mismatch. And when the delivery tool gets reversed engineered onto an existing implant, oftentimes you end up with design compromises, a clunky interaction that can really frustrate physicians, slow down procedures, and even increase risk of the procedure.
And we're seeing in the delivery, we're seeing advances of new technologies like robotics and high-res imaging and guidance systems sort of reshaping interventional procedures. What demands do those new technologies put on the delivery systems, and how do those interact with the implant design choices?
Yeah, great question. These technologies are really raising the performance bar of the delivery systems.
Mm-hmm.
The delivery systems need to be highly visible under all different kinds of imaging modalities, fluoro, IVUS, OCT, CT. They need to be digitally compatible, not just with marker bands, but with integrated sensors, RFID tags, or even real-time data capture. They also need to mechanically play nice with those robotic systems, and that means having really low friction and being highly steerable. On the implant side, the designs are evolving also. Radiopaque markers, geometries that better align for imaging guidance, and AI is pushing things even further, driving predictive deployment modeling, which means both implants and digital systems need to be more standardized and reproducible.
So as you're saying that, I'm realizing that you probably really need to work together right at the start to design both the implant and the delivery system. What are the risks of waiting long?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, the delivery system's part of the conversation when you're initially sketching out that implant.
Gotcha.
The earlier you're working on it, the better. If you wait too long, you risk multiple redesigns. You get poor feedback potentially from those early physician interactions, perhaps even poor performance in your development testing in critical situations. That can lead to regulatory delays because the system doesn't validate properly. It's just a lot easier and faster to plan that delivery system earlier rather than later.
Well, Chris, can you share an example of where early integration of an implant and delivery system, where the teams worked together and improved product performance, or maybe accelerated the development of device more quickly?
Sure. One project comes to mind right away. It's a braided stent delivery system that
Hmm.
needed an unusual deployment mechanism. We spoke earlier about some of these novel systems having stage releases or forcing some new designs and deployment. Well, this one had a very novel need to deploy proximal to distal. In most self expanding systems, as you deploy them, they deploy distal to proximal. So this required a custom delivery system with a suture release mechanism. And because we designed the implant release mechanism deployment system all together, we solved some issues like a length shift. A lot of times you bring a braided self-expanding system down, they elongate as they become smaller on the shaft, and then they'll form their natural length during deployment. And by using this suture release mechanism that allowed it to go proximal to distal from the very beginning, we cut about 6 months off of the development, and we were able to get into clinical trials in 11 months.
Wow. So, how have virtual simulation tools like FEA and FSI and dynamic modeling, how do they enable more synchronized development of implants and delivery systems? And now are we actually seeing fewer surprises down the line with validation and clinical testing as a result?
Fewer surprises is exactly it. Uh, they let us predict how the implant and delivery systems will interact during deployment. They allow us to model different patient anatomies, and we can even test worst case scenarios virtually before we build the first device. And that means, like you said, fewer surprises. Fewer surprises when we do bench testing, fewer surprises in animal studies, and fewer surprises ultimately when we get into clinical testing. The teams can iterate faster at a lower cost, and we end up with stronger documentation for regulators along the way.
That's great. And we're focusing, I think, on the important part of the delivery systems and how they operate inside the body. But what about the user interaction, the human factors? What are the advantages? What advantages does early usability testing really provide when implant and delivery development are coordinated from the start?
Yeah, when you do usability testing early, you get to optimize things that the physicians really care about: handle ergonomics, how it feels in their hand, and how they may sequence the device naturally. And many times as engineers, we know how we would use the device. We have an
Hmm.
intuitive expectation, and we think others will use the device also. But all physicians are different. They have different trainings, they have different ideas themselves, different preferences. Some are left-handed, some are right-handed. Some physicians are petite and some are really large. And so how they interact with the device oftentimes is not what the engineers expect,
Hmm.
especially when you've got a new technology that's using or needs a new type of delivery system. So that early usability testing allows us to understand how the physicians interact with the device. You get to spot intuitive use issues very early before they're locked into the design. And when the implant and delivery systems work together from the start, that usability testing reflects real world use and not just theory. That ultimately makes the devices safer. It's easier adoption for the physicians and becomes less of a training burden for the companies as they go into the clinical use.
Interesting. Looking at the industry, in companies where implant and delivery systems operate in silos, what cultural or organizational shifts are needed to really support a more integrated R&D effort?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would just add that it's not just companies that are doing these internally. And many times that's the case. But what we're seeing here at Aptyx is sometimes companies are wanting to maintain one of these technologies in house, and they may be allowing a contract developer to do the delivery system. or
Hmm.
sometimes they're doing the delivery system and they want us to do the implants. And that can be a challenge. And it's really important that everyone has a systems mindset. We have cross-functional teams. The teams have shared KPIs. There's early involvement from quality, manufacturing, and leadership. And everyone has to aim for system success.
Final question. We have a lot of startups listening to the podcast. They've got limited budgets. They've got tight timelines, but we've talked about the importance of early delivery systems. So what's your advice for them for prioritizing delivery system design, even when their implants are still evolving?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a very common situation.
Hmm.
We always tell our startups, don't ignore delivery systems just because you may be short on time or money,
Hmm.
but to start with the clinical requirements and focus on the user needs. And when you can do that, then you can focus on true fundamentals. What dimensions are you dealing with? What forces are you dealing with? What anatomical pathways do you need to navigate? And then use modular concepts that allow us to explore options in parallel. And if possible, get an experienced partner like Aptyx or other consultants, even in a regulatory phase or feasibility concept as early as possible to get that support and input in your system. Skipping delivery early feels like a shortcut, but it usually costs far more later. For startups or really any other company, it's a false economy of delaying delivery system development in these systems.
That's a great overview, Chris. I really appreciate your focusing a light on an area of technology of implants that I often overlook. So, Chris Steadham, thank you for joining us on the FOMO series.
Thank you for having me. Really enjoyed it.